Welcome to the Self-Performance Strategies Podcast. Unlocking the secrets of self-performance so you can improve mentally, emotionally, and physically. The goal of this podcast is to help you create more freedom of time, money, and purpose. My name is Stephen, and I am your host. I believe there is always an easier way, and I am here to help you find it. Let's jump in to the SPS podcast. Hello. Welcome to the 7th episode of the SPS podcast of the Self-Performance Strategies podcast. My name is Stephen, as you know, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about a rather interesting subject. Does success lead to failure? Does it? Does success lead to failure? This is a important idea to understand because I tend to believe that unchecked success does lead to failure, because the more success you have, the more opportunities you get, and the more you start chasing things that you may not have wanted in the first place. But we'll jump into that deeper as we go through this episode of the podcast. But as I always do at the start of each episode, let's discuss a quote that will frame our conversation. And this one comes from Frank Herbert and the book Dune. Knowing where the trap is, that's the first step to invading it. Knowing where the trap is the first step to evading it. That is a huge idea to think about. If you know that when you get successful, or if you know when things start going well, that you're going to have more opportunities, you can start to prepare for that, and you can actually set yourself up in a way that you're not going to let success become failure. Some people call this the success trap. But what is the success trap? Well, behind every victory is the desire for the next one. You know that. You want more when you start winning. And that can be a good thing. If you have good goals and it's linked to a purpose, getting to a result and then going to the next one is a great strategy. But maybe you stop thinking about what you actually want and you start chasing success just for the sake of it. In reality, there is no peak to success. Climbing to the next one can become addictive. Just getting that dopamine hit, the chase becomes addictive. Now, if you think about history and the success trap, it has caught out many infamous leaders in history. You know, from Caesar to Napoleon to some little German dude with a mustache, all undone by their desire for more, the next success, and their ego-boosting win, only to be unsatisfied at its summit. They were all brought down by their hubris. Even going back to Alexander the Great, all of them, if you look at the way that they exploded and then collapsed, it was their ego-boosting chase for domination, for that big success. They just couldn't settle. So for you, pay rises and awards are all excellent for a while. But at a certain point, when you reach a certain level in life, you start to realize how little they mean. And you ask yourself, are you only doing this to look good? You know, is happiness really inside these things? That's a huge question. Now, sorting out your finances and your career, starting your business, growing your entrepreneurial journey, all that is extremely important. Extremely important. Investing, having more coming out than coming in, creating a safety net, having a career or a business that allows you to be yourself and live your dreams and support your family. These are concrete goals that we should all aim for. These are foundational goals that are extremely important to us. However, the success trap happens when we start attaching our self-worth to status and arbitrary numbers. You know, you go after titles and organizations. Guilty, 100% guilty for that. In my career, I've gone after specific roles in an organization, and when I got them, I was like, why did I do this? I would have been better just staying where I was. You know, you get addicted to a certain number in your bank account or a certain monthly recurring revenue, and you start chasing these things that don't actually really mean anything to the quality of your life. You don't let yourself enjoy life until those things happen. Like, you can't enjoy life until you get that job title or that big number in your bank account. Your ego knows these numbers and these arbitrary things boost your happiness, but it doesn't create lasting happiness. It just doesn't. When you live like this, you keep chasing ever higher summits in the hope that one out there will satisfy you. But in reality, what you're actually doing is you're trying to fill a hole in your heart. Yes, you're trying to fill something inside you. You're trying to fill this gap. If I had this, if I had more, if I was more successful, people would respect me, people might love me, I might have more friends, my dreams might come true. You attach a glamorous lifestyle, or you say to yourself, life will be different when this happens. But the funny thing is, it's not. It's not any different. You just end up with a different job title. You just end up with more money in your bank account. Yes, more money can create a little bit of happiness, but if you're not focusing on the now, creating that happiness with that money, and you're just chasing more, you're not using it appropriately. So when you fall into the success trap thinking of more equals happiness, you need to look for happiness in other places. And that's the reality here. You can't get happiness from chasing success. You have to find happiness in the now, today. And you need to sit down and realize that the climb, the now, the reality that you're working in, what you're focusing on right now is the real treasure. The time with your kids, the time with your family, the time in the gym, the time writing content, the time making podcasts like this, the time doing the things that you enjoy doing is the treasure. It is the happiness. And those arbitrary numbers aren't actually going to give you the happiness that you think they're going to give you. They are going to help a little bit, but in the bigger grand scheme of things, it's not what the whole journey is all about. And that's why success can be a trap. The climb towards your goals is the real treasure. There's only bleak emptiness at the top if you think the summit will bring you more joy. Because materialism, hedonism, stuff and numbers doesn't give you the joy. It's the stuff that you do during the day, how you feel, how you talk to yourself, and how you act brings you the real joy. So how does this happen in your life? How do you fall into the success trap? What are the steps that happen that take you from being successful to being in the success trap? And I want to break down at the back end of this podcast 4 steps that I think can really highlight for you what happens, what's the journey. So you can actually reflect back on your own life, reflect back currently where you are, and you can assess, well, where am I? Am I in these steps? Because as I mentioned before, history is littered with people who have fallen into the success trap. And also when you think about companies have fallen into the success trap as well. And one key one I'll note here in this podcast is Apple. If you think about Apple back in the late 90s, they nearly went out of business. They luckily recovered. But you think about what was going on there, they just had way too much opportunity. They spread themselves far too thin, but luckily Steve Jobs came back and was able to help save them. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's dive in and think about, well, how does this happen? What's the journey? Well, part 1 obviously is your success. At some point, your self-performance was on point. Yeah? It's a self-performance podcast. So this is what we're building our self-performance here to get to our goals, to get success. We had clear goals, clear targets, clear vision, and you acted each day to make all those things come true. You created success, but with your success, it led to opportunities. I mentioned this at the start of the podcast. Opportunities can be a good thing if you select the right ones that are ultimately aligned with your main purpose or aligned with your big goals in life. But often opportunities come along that take you away from your purpose. They build bridges to islands that you didn't even want to go to. So you take on these opportunities that aren't fully aligned with you, and you've got to remember that not all opportunities are good opportunities. Then part 3 happens, step 3 happens. Too many options and opportunities lead to your efforts and energy being stretched thin. You end up wondering where it all went wrong. You're like, oh my God, hold on a second. 6 months ago, I was king of the world. A year ago, I was on top of everything. Everything was great. Now I'm stretched thin. I'm pulling my hair out. You have so much on that you're not sure which direction to take. Often you procrastinate and you take no action. Yeah, and we're starting to see what happened here. You've lost sight. Originally at the start in part 1, step 1, you had all these goals, this vision, direction. You were very narrowed in on what you're doing. And now you have opportunity. You've stretched yourself thin and you've lost that flow in that direction. And that gets us to step 4, part 4 of the little journey, is your confused efforts undermine the clarity that led to your success in the first place. This has happened to me in my life, 100%. Being in organizations, having great success, really doing well in a role, and deciding that an opportunity that came up for me was the thing that I should do, and I did it, But it wasn't the thing that I should have done because it wasn't aligned with my life, with my purpose, how I was setting up currently. I took that promotion, took that big job, and funny enough, a year later, I actually left that organization because it was a horrible year, because that role that I took was not suited for me. It was not the right role, because I saw it as an opportunity, but I didn't think about, was this the right opportunity? Is this a good opportunity? Yeah? When you have too much on, you're feeling stretched thin, it leaves you stuck, it leaves you failing, you're overwhelmed, you're lost in a sea of confusion, and hopefully you start to realize that you need to take action before your ship hits rocks and sinks. This is where a lot of businesses fail. They don't cut back, they don't take action. And the way out is to start really getting narrowed in on what you want again. If we go back to the Apple example and Steve Jobs, when he came back to Apple in 1997, he cut over 70% of the company's product line. 70%. They were stretched way too thin. They were not the market leader in any area. And you have to think about your life in the same way. You need to get back to that clarity that you had. You need to align with your big vision for your life and for your business. That's how you're going to create success again, and that's how you're going to avoid the success trap. If you're constantly thinking about your key purpose, your key goals, where you want to go in life, and when new opportunities come up, because you're going to get successful, you are going to be successful, and when new opportunities come up, you've got to ask yourself, is this an opportunity that's going to build a bridge that's going to take me away from my success eventually, or is this an opportunity that's going to speed up my journey towards the ultimate goal that I have decided for myself? So if you pick the right moves, you'll speed up your journey. If you pick the wrong moves, you fall into the success trap. And as I've highlighted in this episode, the success trap has brought down many infamous people in history, and it has brought down many organizations. Don't fall into the success trap. Thanks very much for joining me on this episode of the SPS podcast. I hope now you can use the information in this podcast to steer your life away from the success trap. That is the goal here. Avoid failure, avoid getting successful and then failing because you picked the wrong opportunities. I hope you can get that out of this episode. As always, if you want to hit me up on my socials, at Steve Timoney, that's on Twitter, that's on Instagram, that's on TikTok, send me a DM, let me know what you think of the podcast. You can also hit me up on my main website, and that's Stephen Timoney with StephenTimoney.com, and you will see everything there from my blog to more podcast episodes to everything else that I do. Again, thank you for joining me in this episode, and hopefully I'll speak to you in the next one. Make it a good one.